This year, we thought we would step back in time and teach you about an event that reminds us how war makes us all vulnerable to suffering, even if we're not at the front lines. This year, the year was 1917. Canada was in the midst of World War I. Last year, at our Remembrance Day service, we talked to you about the famous Battle of Vimy Ridge that occurred in April of 1917. But only 8 months later, a major disaster happened on Canadian soil in the city of Halifax. Last December marked the 100th anniversary of this tragedy.
Now this story may be familiar to staff members here who have lived in the maritime provinces of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, and Newfoundland and Labrador. And some of you who are listening through 10 history class might be familiar with it as well. Regardless, it is a story worth analyzing on a day like this.
Let's take a look at the beautiful city of Halifax in more recent times. Haligonians, as the locals are called, are familiar with the damp, stiff east wind that brings with it the distinct smell of salt water from the Atlantic Ocean, as the city sits beside one of the largest natural harbors in the world, the Bedford Basin. In fact, the original inhabitants of this location, the Mi'kmaq, called this place Chibougamau, meaning Big Harbor. The British would later rename it Halifax.
City streets are sharply sloped towards the harbor, and the old British fort, the Citadel, sits atop the city, providing a $1 million view of what lies below. The harbor itself is very quaint, friendly, and busy. Pier 21 is a spot where over 1 million new immigrants entered our country between 1928 and 1971. From the boardwalk, you can see Theodore the tugboat, different vendors, and an import from PEI. Cow's ice cream, for those that have tried it, you know is the best in the world.
Back to December of 1917. Since Halifax was one of the largest harbors in the world, it made one of the busiest during World War I, one of the most important and therefore one of the most vulnerable to attack. Every day, ships were coming in, some with wounded soldiers, and others were leaving as part of convoys to send more supplies and more soldiers to the front lines in France. A war that was predicted to last 4 to 6 months, according to both sides, was a war that was still raging on after 3 years in 1917 with millions dead. One of our jobs as historians is to try to walk in the shoes of those who came before us. So in that spirit, think about what the atmosphere in the city would have been like at that time. The war certainly weighed on people's minds. Watching wounded Canadian soldiers come off the ships, reading the daily and escalating death tolls in the Halifax Herald, fearing a potential attack from German U-boats as they would venture to Canada's east coast and even into the Gulf of St. Lawrence, became a normal part of life. Furthermore, the food and resource rationing that was occurring throughout the country made it difficult for the Haligonians to be happy and cheerful. But it was December, and the season of Advent was upon the city. There was hope and optimism in the air. The excitement and joy that all communities seemed to embrace at Christmas time was alive in Halifax. The build-up to Christmas Day seemed to provide a level of escapism from the true realities of the war. And so, the stage was set for the events that occurred on December 6, 1917. The weather that morning was clear and calm. If there was to be any foreshadowing of disaster, it certainly did not come from the sky. The harbor was busy as usual, and once the anti-submarine net was lifted, ships were out again. Early in the morning of the 6th, a Norwegian relief ship, the Emo, began slowly moving down the harbor on its way to New York to pick up relief supplies. At the same time, a fully loaded French munition ship, Mont Blanc, made its way into the Narrows up towards the harbor to join a convoy that was headed to Europe. The Mont Blanc was loaded to almost beyond capacity, with about 3,000 tons of highly explosive material, including picric acid, TNT, high-octane benzol fuel, and gun cotton. 3,000 tons equals 2,721,000 kilograms, or 5,986,200 pounds of explosives. The French ship should have been flying a munitions flag to warn all who could see it that it was carrying dangerous cargo, but it did not want to make itself a sitting target for German U-boats. The Emo had been forced towards the Dartmouth shore to avoid a ship that had been on the wrong side of the channel. This put it in line with the incoming Mont Blanc. Now, some might think that two big ships should be able to avoid colliding, but things aren't always so simple. Have you ever managed to walk through the busy halls of PF and not bump into someone? Yet another time, when it is only you and someone else in the hall, you manage to run into them. You make a decision to pass them on the right, but what if they choose the same way? Maybe you should pass them on the left. You change your mind again, and then boom, collision. Remember, these ships could not turn on a dime, and their sheer mass meant that momentum caused them to drift for quite a while, and the harbor was filled over capacity
capacity with other ships. Rules and regulations were being bent in order to try and win the war.
So, as these ships approached, both signaled that they had the right of way. Finally, realizing the collision was imminent, the Emo stopped, then reversed, as the Mont Blanc took what it hoped was an evasive turn towards the Halifax shore in front of the Emo. Despite these efforts, both ships collided at slow speed. The Emo gouged into the Mont Blanc, knocking over the barrels of fuel and explosive on the deck. The Emo reversed its engines, but this created metal-on-metal friction, and sparks began to fly. These sparks led the spilled fuel to ignite on board the Mont Blanc.
The ship did not explode instantly. The French crew tried but failed to put out the fire and then abandoned ship. The people of Halifax could see it burning in the harbor, edging closer to the city. With no munitions flag flying, no one realized that it was a floating disaster waiting to happen. Some people gathered down by the harbor, others went to the windows of the buildings they were in. Homes, schools, places of business, to watch the fire and its dazzling display of fireworks. The occasional barrel of fuel would rip to the sky like a rocket.
The Emo reversed its engines at approximately 8:45 a.m., and the fire on deck would burn for approximately another 20 minutes before total disaster would strike. It was basically a floating time bomb. Between 9:04 and 9:05 a.m., the Mont Blanc and all its cargo finally exploded, leaving the city of Halifax, in an instant, totally unrecognizable.
This watch, found in wreckage, stopped at the exact time of the blast. Simply put, this was, at the time, the largest explosion in history, and still remains the largest non-atomic explosion. It eerily looked like the mushroom cloud in Hiroshima at the end of World War II.
The death toll would reach 2,000. Another 9,000 were injured, and hundreds blinded, either by the flash or by the shards of glass that flew in people's eyes, as many were watching the original fire from their windows. In fact, in terms of the combination of property damage and loss of life, it remains the worst disaster in Canadian history.
The number of blinded people led to the creation of the Canadian Institute for the Blind. In one such case, a little baby boy, Eric Davidson, pressed his small face up to the cold window pane. The two ships in Halifax Harbor were exchanging horn blasts. His mother explained that vessels used loud whistles as they passed, but on that day, December 6, 1917, they did not pass. The toddler, playing with a toy train on the kitchen windowsill, watched the flames engulf the ship, the last images he would ever see. There, at the age of 2 years and 7 months, Eric Davidson was blinded in the Halifax explosion. My father was still looking out, and all the glass came out of his face and his upper body, his daughter, Marilyn Elliott, said in the interview. Doctors looked at him and determined that his eyes couldn't be saved. Both of his eyes were removed that day. In an instant, a little baby, a happy-go-lucky baby, is without sight.
The shockwave broke windows in Truro, 100 kilometers away, and was even felt and heard hundreds of kilometers further.
As if things were not bad enough, a tidal wave that was caused by the blast instantly hammered the shoreline. This 1,140-pound anchor shaft from the Mont Blanc flew nearly 2.5 miles in the air before it landed at this location. It was a shattered city.
Buildings were obliterated, metal twisted from the heat. This photo shows the 10-story high sugar refinery before and after the explosion.
In this next photo, local resident Grady Shett shows a glob of melted glass from the explosion that was unearthed in his backyard.
The sight was awful, with people hanging out of windows dead, some with their heads missing, and some thrown onto the overhead telegraph wires. A firefighter recalled at the time.
Entire families were erased from the face of the earth. 46 members of the Jackson family died in the explosion, the largest loss of life in a single family. Here is a picture of the deceased members and a picture of the descendants of some of the survivors who reunited back in 2015. In other cases, only one survivor lived. One woman, Mary Jean Hinch, lost 10 children and her husband in the explosion. Pregnant and alone, she was rescued after being pinned under lumber for 24 hours. She and her unborn son were the only survivors in her whole family.
Mothers couldn't bear the deaths of innocent babies. Children disappeared without a trace. Others turned up days later in makeshift morgues. Girls and boys struggled to comprehend being suddenly orphaned. Wives mourned their husbands, killed instantly in harborfront factories. Soldiers grappled with the insurmountable trauma of watching homes burn to the ground, families still inside, the scent of burning flesh in the air.
At first, many believed that the Germans had attacked the city, and why not? Their U-boats hugged the coastline since 1914. That is the reason the Mont Blanc was not flying its mission flag. There had long been rumors of German spies in Canada, and during the war, paranoia is always heightened. The blast caused many surviving Caledonians to experience shell shock, just like the frontline soldiers. In modern times, we call this post-traumatic stress disorder. And now, the city looked like all the war-ravaged cities in Europe. It was a mirror image of the 100 shelled cities, towns, and villages in France and Belgium. It gave Halifax the ghostly distinction of being the only Canadian city to truly experience what the war was like on European soil.
Rescue crews started to search for the wounded and survivors. People searched for their loved ones and tried to identify bodies, but some literally returned to ash from the heat. Temperatures of 5,000 degrees Celsius and pressures of thousands of atmospheres accompanied the moment of detonation at the center of the explosion.
Only a few hours after the explosion, Arthur Barnstein, a Halifax citizen, was appointed head of the mortuary committee. A central morgue was set up in the basement of the Chibouque School. He was in charge of keeping municipal death records. In 1912, his father was responsible for identifying the bodies of Titanic victims that had been picked up and brought to the nearest large port, which was Halifax. Faced with having to track so many unknown victims, he developed the first system for identifying the dead from mass casualties. He established a numbering system and the use of mortuary beds, which held any clothing and effects found on the body. Now, only 5 years later, his son Arthur would use this system on victims of his own city. Surrounding towns and cities wanted to help once they heard the news. However, Mother Nature would make it difficult, as it dealt with the city another challenge in the form of a snowstorm. When it rains, it pours, or perhaps it snows.
On the morning of December 7th, snow began to fall in the ruins of Halifax. By the afternoon, temperatures of -4 degrees Celsius as the wind intensified from the northwest to 55 kilometers an hour, with gusts over 90 kilometers an hour, producing wind chills of -15 degrees Celsius. A combination of blowing and drifting snow gave blizzard-like conditions, and by the end of the day, 40 centimeters of snow had fallen over the city. While the wind had been out of the northwest that day, you would have predicted that it had come from the east, bringing the bloodshed and destruction that was occurring in Europe. As the saying goes, an east wind brings no good.
Like all tragedies, there are usually some miracles that go along with them. Only 23 months old, Annie Welch was found in the wreckage of a home, sheltered in the ash pan of a stove. One of the oldest survivors of the explosion, she lived to age 95. She became known as Ashpan Annie.
There was also no shortage of heroic efforts. Patrick Vincent Coleman was a train dispatcher for the Canadian Government Railways who was killed in the Halifax explosion, but not before he sent a message to an incoming passenger train to stop out of range of the explosion. Hold up the train. Ammunition ship fire in the harbor, making for Pier 6 and will explode. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys.
In other cases, most of the crew aboard the Stella Marie died attempting to attach a line to the Mont Blanc to tow it away from Pier 6, while 9 Halifax firefighters died as they took on the blaze.
As stories of the disaster got out, Canadian generosity flooded in. Children in Brantford, Ontario gave up their Christmas presents to raise money for the children of Halifax, donating $15,000 for relief efforts. People in Truro, Nova Scotia, lined the tracks at the rail station, waiting to help the waves of refugees that arrived from Halifax in need of food and shelter. There were thousands of similar examples of Canadian generosity.
But there was one source of help that we may not think of right away. Although we are sure it did not shock the Caledonians, this source was America, particularly Massachusetts, and even more specifically, Boston. But why Boston? Well, geographically, they are close, and relations between the two cities demonstrate the power of geography. In North America, our physical geography tends to run in a north-south direction, and yet our country, in many ways, runs east-west. And these physical landforms do not simply stop when we reach a political border, like the Canadian-U.S. political border, because they predate those human-made borders.
Physical geography, for centuries, has determined what people do in a region, how they survive, what they eat, what their cultures and economies are compromised of. Halifax and Boston share the same physical geography and over 2 degrees of latitude separate. It is the reason that Haligonians have more in common with Boston than fellow Canadians from the prairies or the West Coast.
It is also the reason why our first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, built a railway to unite our various geographic regions in the east-west pattern, because the north-south connections were already so prevalent. For both Halifax and Boston, who shared the Atlantic Ocean and the Appalachian Mountains, fishing, shipbuilding, pulp and paper were huge for generations. These aspects made the two cities neighbors and in many ways family.
Boston authorities learned of the disaster via telegraph and quickly organized and dispatched a relief train around 10 p.m. that night to assist survivors. The blizzard delayed the train, which finally arrived in the early morning on December 8th, and immediately began distributing food, water, and medical supplies. Many personnel on the train were able to relieve the Nova Scotia medical staff, most of whom had worked without rest since the explosion occurred.
Boston created a Halifax Relief Committee to raise funds and organize aid. Relief ads were printed in the Boston Globe. $100,000 had been raised within the first hour. After speaking with the U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, Mayor James Curley was able to secure a $30,000 carload of army blankets to send to Halifax.
Tracks through the northeast were cleared for a train departing North Station 12 hours after the explosion. The train brought 30 of Boston's leading physicians and surgeons, 70 nurses, a completely equipped 500 bed-based hospital unit, and a vast amount of hospital supplies for the estimated 20,000 destitute survivors.
Total relief contributions from Massachusetts totaled over $750,000. Remember that the year was 1917, and so this was a tremendous amount of money. In fact, this would be equivalent to approximately $16 million today. The Boston Symphony even performed a sellout benefit concert the next week for Halifax relief. This is the type of relationship we should be learning about. The Americans were always helping the Canadians because they knew that the Canadians would do the same for them. Both sides saw each other as a family.
Unfortunately, in today's politics, we have seen that world leaders administer more threats than handshakes. Threats of economic trade wars and retaliatory tariffs from some of the leaders south of the border. Also, there have been criticisms that Canada has not carried its weight with contributions to NATO. But perhaps those critics should look back to the times of the Halifax explosion and see the mutual respect Boston had for Halifax and vice versa. If the explosion had happened in Boston, the city of Halifax would have been there for them. If critics studied this bond that the two cities had, it would be virtually impossible to threaten each other with trade wars or anything. It's simply not what neighbors do to each other.
The city of Halifax certainly did not take the help from the American family lightly. The efforts were greatly appreciated. Canadian Prime Minister at the time of the disaster, Robert Borden, personally thanked Boston Mayor James Curley for the city's relief efforts. And in 1918, Halifax sent Boston a gift in return, a beautiful Nova Scotian Christmas tree. Remember, this event took place 19 days before Christmas. And for every year since, the memories of the explosion and Boston's assistance have been simultaneously ingrained into the very fabric and folklore of this Canadian city's history.
In 1971, the residents of Halifax thought they would again send a Christmas tree to Boston, as a tangible reminder that the city had not and would never forget the help it received. Now, the reality is that it would have been much easier for Halifax to try and forget such a painful tragedy. Jim Coubelier, a 101-year-old survivor of the Halifax explosion, said the disaster wasn't spoken of when he was growing up. People tried to forget it. You don't carry that stuff around, said Coubelier, a baby who was at home on Lady Hannah Road on the outskirts of the blast zone at the time of the disaster. I never heard them talk about it.
However, the people of Halifax knew that if they buried the memory, that would include stopping the act of gratitude towards Boston. So every year, since 1971, Halifax has sent a Nova Scotian tree to its American neighbor, and there's a tree lighting ceremony in the Boston Common in the middle of the city that kicks off the city's holiday season.
Now, throughout the year, an employee in the Nova Scotia Department of Natural Resources with the title of Christmas Tree Specialist keeps an eye out for a worthy evergreen. Often, the tree is donated by a family member in memory of a relative who died in the 1917 explosion.
Nova Scotians notify the department if they have a tree that meets the specifications and would like to donate it. A forester visits the site and makes a final selection. The specifications are Boston fir, white spruce or red spruce, 40 to 50 feet tall, healthy with good color, medium to heavy density, uniform and symmetrical, and easy to access.
When they find it, the province holds a celebratory tree-cutting ceremony, and the next day, a send-off parade in downtown Halifax. The festivities even include @TreeForBoston Twitter and Facebook accounts to follow its journey to the common.
Years later, in 1961, American President John F. Kennedy said about the Canadian-American relationship that geography has made us neighbors, history has made us friends, economics has made us partners, and necessity has made us allies. He could have based his beliefs solely on a Halifax-Boston relationship. We think it's time to revisit these sentiments and act like family, and then perhaps, collectively, nations can work together to solve other problems that exist outside of our own borders, such as world peace.
At this time, we just wanted to mention a small related connection with the Halifax explosion. In 1972, a restaurant opened in our city near Gooching Beach Park. It was called the Osawiki, and it was a railroad car-themed restaurant. The name, Osawiki Express Dining Cars, was inspired by the train to Mariposa depicted in Stephen Leacock's Sunshine Sketches of a Little Town.
In the early 1970s, the restaurant's owner purchased a railway car that was actually in Halifax at the time of the 1917 explosion. This car had been built in 1896 and was owned by the Dominion Atlantic Railway Company. In 1912, it had been given the name the Nova Scotia.
At the time of the blast, the general manager of the railway company, George Graham and his family, were having breakfast on board the Nova Scotia, as it was parked at the North Street station. The car sheltered the Graham family from the terrible blast, as debris flew all around them. Many people were killed beside the train station. With Graham lucky to be alive, he headed off to a nearby community that had a telegraph service, in order to get more help for the victims of Halifax.
Over the years, this railway car has slowly made its way west and eventually to Orillia as part of the Osawiki restaurant. It served as the restaurant's office and reception area until the business closed in 1910. The Nova Scotia's current resting spot is in the Railway Museum in downtown Toronto.
So, let us remember that Halifax has experienced more suffering than any other Canadian city during World War I. Understand that you do not have to be on the front lines of a conflict to become a casualty of that conflict. It should be obvious to us that strong international relations based on mutual respect should be the goal of all governments, and treating neighbors like family leads to mutually beneficial relationships.